All right, so unfortunately, here in the United States, we are having this ongoing debate as to whether or not the United States and a lot of other Western wealthy countries around the world should get behind what is called the TRIPS waiver, which is basically this proposal at the World Trade Organization proposed by India and South Africa. India, obviously, struggling significantly with COVID right now. And this proposal would basically relinquish the vaccine patents so that a lot of these developing or poorer countries around the world are able to produce and distribute COVID vaccines to their populations in an efficient and quick way. Right now, basically, we have what amounts to be a global vaccine apartheid with a bunch of wealthy developed nations like the United States and a lot of those countries in Europe having a lot of good news, especially here in the United States recently, where we're vaccinating significantly higher proportions of our population. Meanwhile, in all of these other poorer countries, they have barely seen any vaccines at all. And in my mind, at least, this is a pretty open and shut argument here. If we don't vaccinate the rest of the developing world, then variants of COVID will continue to pop up, and eventually there will be variants that negate a lot of the progress we've made here on vaccine distribution. And so it's a pretty simple argument from that angle. It's also a simple argument from the morality side of this, of should we prioritize millions of lives or big pharmaceutical profits. It's a pretty open and shut case, in my opinion, at least. But unfortunately, because of the rampant rank corruption in the United States political system and our government, it's not an open and shut case, because we have a lot of politicians, including Joe Biden himself, who are totally swamped and entrenched in big pharmaceutical money and donations, where they're effectively being bribed in order to protect these vaccine patents at the expense of the entire rest of the developing world and our ability to move past COVID. So here are the Democrats that are bankrolled by Big Pharma who are refusing to back the COVID vaccine patent waiver. So they say this is common dreams, the top Democratic recipients of Big Pharma cash in Congress are echoing industry talking points in opposition to a push to suspend intellectual property protection. So the leading Democratic recipients of pharmaceutical industry cash in Congress are refusing to endorse calls for a temporary suspension of patents for coronavirus vaccines and therapeutics, an indication of Big Pharma's influence as it lobbies aggressively in Washington and elsewhere to maintain monopoly control over production. Huffington Post's Daniel Marins reported late Monday that 110 House Democrats have signed onto a letter led by Representative Jan Schakowsky from Illinois calling on Joe Biden to support the proposal that I was just talking about at the World Trade Organization, which is set to be considered this week. So Joe Biden is going to have a flashpoint here this week where he's going to have the ability to act on this. So whatever way that he chooses to go, we're going to get an answer pretty soon. And 110 House Democrats, signed on to this letter calling for it. Unfortunately, there's a reverse side of that, and as many Democrats are calling for him to release the vaccine patents, there are people on the opposite end who are on the side of big pharmaceutical money and are putting forward arguments like this. So, citing the latest campaign finance data from the Center for Responsive Politics, Marins noted that none of the 9 House Democrats among Congress's top 25 recipients of donations from the pharmaceutical industry PACs in the 2020 election have signed on to this letter. So magically, I know, right? Corruption, pretty obvious in our political system. We basically have a system of legalized bribery and corruption here with our lobbying. And so it's not surprising that these people who are the biggest recipients of pharmaceutical donations would then be acting in the best interests of those pharmaceutical companies. It's really not that complicated or unexpected given the political system that we have, but they continue on. Democratic Representatives Scott Peters of California, Ron Kind of Wisconsin, number 7 and 19 respectively on the top 25 list, have actually solicited support for another letter to Biden asking him to not waive the intellectual property rules, so doing that counterbalance to the 110 Democrats who are in favor of getting rid of it. In addition to Peters and Kind, the other top House Democratic recipients of pharmaceutical industry cash in the 2020 campaign cycle were Frank Pallone, Richard Neal, Anna Eshoo, Robin Kelly, Brad Schneider, Kurt Schrader, and Raul Ruiz, and then Senator Chris Coons from Delaware, who's pretty tight with Joe Biden. They're both obviously from Delaware, and that's Joe Biden's home state, and so he's pretty good friends with the senators from Delaware, and he was the top recipient of pharma PAC money among Senate Democrats and has refused to join Senator Bernie Sanders and 9 other colleagues urging Biden to endorse the patent waiver, which would lift the key legal barrier, as we were saying, allowing for generic manufacturing for these other countries. So Senator Chris Coons, so the top recipient of the big pharmaceutical bribes, as we should be talking about them, here's what he had to say, okay? Listen to how ridiculous his justification is for this truly evil shit that he's doing here. But other lawmakers who oppose the waiver warn that loosening protections could harm the nation on the global stage. So he thinks it's going to harm the nation on the global stage to protect our vaccine patents at the expense of millions of lives in all of these other countries. Okay, yeah, I'm sure that that's going to make them love us, won't it? Senator Christopher Coons from Delaware, a close ally of Biden, has even invoked the January 6th storming of the Capitol among reasons to protect the patents, saying it revealed the need to unite the country. Here's what he said. All of this is a wake-up call for us that we need to have another Sputnik-like moment of reinvestment in American innovation and competitiveness. Coons added at a think tank event last week, a central part of being successful in this competition is continuing with our constitutionally created, protected property right of a patent. So he's talking about this as if it's another Sputnik-like moment of reinvestment. Sure, I do think that we should have a significant increase in investment in American manufacturing and innovations in research and development, of course, but what the fuck does that have to do with relinquishing the vaccine patents? There's this bullshit notion that if you take away these vaccine patents, then, suddenly next time a pandemic comes around, there's going to be no incentive for pharmaceutical companies to produce a vaccine. Wrong for a number of reasons. Number one, big pharmaceutical executives and lobbyists and the shareholders who are profiting off of these vaccines are not the ones doing the innovations. Scientists do the innovations, and then these big companies go and buy up the patents and then price gouge people for those innovations. I mean, the guy who invented the polio vaccine famously got rid of it for nothing. He gave it away because he was like, what are you talking about? Am I going to patent the sun? This is something that should obviously be available to everybody, free as free as it can possibly be. But that's not the attitude that these people have. So it's bullshit for that reason, because these big pharmaceutical companies are not the ones innovating. Scientists are innovating. And in a large part, a lot of the technology that went into producing these vaccines was publicly funded. So the idea that we're going to stifle innovation if we simply relinquish these vaccine patents is total bullshit. But that's the notion that they put in here, and I guess I don't even know what he's really talking about. Talking about the January 6th storming of the Capitol building? Are you fucking kidding me? Yeah, we need to unite the country by enforcing a global vaccine apartheid. That's seriously what he's saying here. I mean, it's just absolutely ridiculous. It's pathetic. It's rank corruption. Again, he doesn't actually believe any of the stuff that he just said in this quote. He doesn't believe it straight up. He's telling you. Because he's taking more donations from the big pharmaceutical industry than anyone else in the Senate. So that's very obvious. His incentive is to act on behalf of his donors, not on behalf of public health. That's obvious right here. And it's obvious because everything that he just said in this is complete nonsense and unrelated to the question at hand. But of course, he can't make that argument in a positive way because he doesn't have an actual argument. And if you don't believe me, if you don't take my word for why this is so important, let's go ahead and listen to Joe Biden give his take last year when he was talking to A.D. Barkman, I think his name is, who is an activist, a healthcare advocate, and straight up asked Joe Biden, will you get rid of the vaccine patents and make sure that the vaccine patents and these big pharmaceutical companies are not standing in the way of distribution? He straight up asked him a direct question that Joe Biden is going to have to answer this week when he goes to the World Trade Organization, or when his representatives go to the World Trade Organization and decide on what to do with this WTO proposal. So let's go ahead and listen to what he had to say back then.
Versus a vaccine first, will you commit to sharing that technology with other countries? And will you ensure there are no patents to stand in the way of other countries and companies mass producing those life-saving vaccines?
Absolutely, positively. This is the only humane thing in the world to do.
If the U.S.
I mean, what else do you need? There's Joe Biden. He's saying it. He said, this is the only humane thing to do. So if you don't believe me, you don't want to take my word for it, take Joe Biden's word himself. This is what he said last year when he was asked directly on this while he was on the campaign trail. Then once he gets elected and people have given him their votes along lines like this, I mean, it really is just sick for him to lie to somebody like this, who is a healthcare advocate, who asks him a straight up question and he answers it in this clear of a way. And then he's been going back completely on his word since he's been in office. So very simple issue here. You got to relinquish the vaccine patents so that other countries can ramp up the production on this and we can get millions of vaccines to these populations that are suffering right now. It's a very simple issue, and as Joe Biden said himself, it's the only humane thing to do.